Hello and welcome. You're listening to the Power Reclamation Show, where we explore the mysteries, heartbreaks, and resiliency of the human experience. Together, we'll focus on rewilding ourselves through raising consciousness and dismantling domestication. This is a collective journey of challenging hierarchical systems of power over, as well as our own personal conditioning and limiting belief systems. This show is about embodying the power of love, presence, and our own inner authority. Alexandra, welcome to the show today.
Thank you, sweetheart. It's wonderful to be here.
I've been really looking forward to this conversation because I think it was just a couple of months ago, not even, when you and I were on the phone for a couple of hours and we were exploring what you do, and I was exploring the possibility of working with you. And what I realized was you and I we're at the root of what we're after is very similar. Like I might call mine power reclamation. It feels like you're engaging people with reclaiming all of who they are. And what was so striking for me was the way that I felt after spending time with you. I think I emailed you. I was like, whoa, it was, and we were talking conceptually, but everything was happening in this other level. And you were speaking to it, but you were speaking to it in a way that it still felt like we were working in what you refer to as the quantum field.
Yes.
And I think that's what I would love to explore with you today, and just have listeners get a sense of not only your own journey as a powerful woman, like really claiming your limitless potential, but also how you guide others through it. So I wanted to just begin with, I'll begin with the image that's in my mind, which is you told me that as a little girl, you were already tapped into the quantum field and you were like feeling it through the walls. So can you start there and just share a bit about that?
Yes, of course I can. So firstly, hold on one second. Let me turn off my notifications. Otherwise it's going to keep on making noises. So first off, when you say power reclamation, that's actually exactly what that is one way that I actually verbalize what it is that I do. So, or what it is that I guide women through is a reclamation of power from their mind, actually. Right? So we have made the mind the thing, right? We live in most of us live in a society where the mind is revered, and there's so much within the self-development world and the spiritual worlds and the even manifestation worlds around mindset. Right? It's all about your mindset, and what it is that I guide women through is actually to reclaim their power from their mind, because at the end of the day, we're not our mind. Our mind is a manifested expression of that which we truly are, just like our bodies are, just like our world is, but we are not, our essence is not our mind. We are far more powerful than the mind, even though that the mind is powerful in itself. So yes, I call it power reclamation. I use many different phrases for it. It always seems to be evolving the way that I teach it, and the verbiage and the words and the concepts that I utilize. So
that's so exciting, because I didn't realize that, but when I was feeling into the work, it's, when you were describing it, it felt that way to me. So as you know, this is the Power Reclamation podcast. So it's perfect to have you coming in and bringing your own journey and then your approach to it.
Yeah. And I love to be in connection with women who are also engaging with this work in their way, with their gifts, with their take and their energetics around it, because we cannot have enough powerful women in the world.
Amen.
Because I got into this working with women primarily because it was something the Dalai Lama said back in 2008 In
Yes.
Canada, he said the Western woman will save the world. And let's just take off the Western, just women will
Yes.
save the world. Right. And there's this Chinese proverb that says, when sleeping women wake, mountains will move. And the waking is the awakening to that which we truly are, which also involves the reclaiming of our power. I always like to say it's like we finally pick up the crown and put it on our heads. Right. You know, and you know, she who awakens to her power rules and directs the manifestation of her world. You know, that's the seat of power for us women, is that queenly. And for me, the queen is the mystic and the badass, right? Like combined, merged together. So anyway, back to your question.
I love this.
Around me as a slightly weird child. So yeah, I used to, I mean, the story that I tell that you heard is, and my mother can recount the story. I remember one day she found me with my hands up against the wall and she was like, baby, or she called me Angel, or she still does. She was like, Angel, what are you doing? And I said to her, I was like, I know if I change something in my hands, I can put my hands through the wall. And she was like,
it's like Harry Potter at home.
Right. And this was before the time, right, of Harry Potter. I'm dating myself. So, and yeah, and I used to engage, my parents used to have a lot of dinner parties because of my father's work. And I used to have a little stool. And this was from the age of like 4. Right. I had this little stool and I would go round the people at the dinner parties and I'd stand on my stool and I'd put my hands on them and I would tell them things about them and their lives and their bodies and stuff like that. Wow. And they would always comment that they would feel like tingly or warm, you know, sensation around my hands and through their bodies. So I think I was 8. At the age of 8, my mother realized that I needed something beyond what she knew. And she took me to my first metaphysical bookstore. And I remember meeting a woman on that day who read my aura and read my hands. And I was just like, what is this? This is amazing. You know, and I bought books and that kind of started me on my sort of conscious journey of the quantum field. And then my father, because he is more masculine minded in sort of the mind and knowledge and science, introduced me to quantum physics, which was not a very well-known and or respected field of science discovery at the time. And so it was the merging of the metaphysics and the quantum physics that I started at a very, very young age. You know, I got my first Reiki. I did my first degree in Reiki when I was 14 with my mother, for example.
Wow.
Yes. So I've been on this journey for a minute or two.
A minute or two.
Yeah. Or two.
Well, I just want to give gratitude to your parents for fostering this in you, because that could have easily been shut down, like kooky, weird, whatever, woo woo, whatever people might freak out if it's not. And yet it was encouraged.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I was my dad directing me more in the scientific way. And my mother, she was a nurse and she actually discovered alternative health care because I had ear issues as a kid. I'd have these like 4 or 5 times a year, I'd have these intense earaches where my eardrums would burst. And so actually I have such scar tissue on my right ear that I don't hear very well out of it. Wow. So I was 8. No, was I 8? No, I was 10 when she took me to a homeopath. And the homeopath said, just take her off dairy. And they took me off dairy. And I've never had an earache ever since. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. And
Yeah.
your mom wasn't into alternative medicine at that point. Like,
I think I mean, technically she wasn't, but I think my mother's always had that slightly, she's very, very powerful woman. I've been very blessed in my family to have very powerful women on my mother's side and also my father's side. My great aunts are referred to as the mafia, right? Because these women run the family, right? Nothing,
nice.
nobody else, no man, no nothing runs the family apart from those women. And so I was very blessed to be brought up and immersed in an environment of powerful women. And my mum she's always had the slight tweak of the alternative, right? And the different and the, quote unquote woo woo, however we describe it these days.
Exactly. Great.
Yeah.
So a beautiful blend where both sides were really encouraged.
Yes.
And then you've been on a journey, obviously, of all sorts since then.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, I don't think we even talked about this, but I often feel like those of us who are kind of coming into the fullness of our power go through different periods. Dark nights of the soul might be one term, but periods that actually become kind of the fulcrum that opens us up into a new reality.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if you can speak to one of those pivots for you that brought you even deeper into reclaiming your own power.
Well, the most recent, and when I say recent, it was nearly 5 years ago, was my late husband committing suicide.
That's right. Yeah,
Right?
tell us about that.
Yeah, so I mean, that was so there's an interesting, I do want to preface this before I go into this. The struggle is not required, right? The pain, the suffering, the dark night of the soul is not required. However, it is often part of our journey from phase 1 and into phase 2 and deepening into phase 2 of our awakening journey. I'll go into the phases. It's something that you desire for me to talk about, and there is a reason why we go through these dark nights of the soul. Right. And yes, that is, trauma is very much part of our evolution in the beginning phases. Absolutely. And the beautiful thing is, I just wanted to preface that it's not required. Right? Even though it is part of our journey, it is not required. And that is the beauty of, as we go beyond mind and into phase 3 and into phase 4 of our awakening, we actually become aware that the sacrifice, the struggle, the force, the hustle, the pain, the suffering no longer has to be a part of our journey, because it no longer, it's not truly the catalyst, even though we experienced it in such a way at one point in time.
I want to pause on that before you continue, because this feels like a really important piece, and we can go into it more later with the phases. Sure. But just quickly now, so it's not required, but it occurs. And in retrospect, one might see that it wasn't required depending on what state of consciousness they're in.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Great. So let's unpack that more when we get to the phases, because I love the way you talk about the different phases.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will do. So when it came to my late husband committing suicide, it was something that was out of the blue. Right. And normally a lot of time with suicide, there's a buildup.
Yes.
And if it had occurred, sort of at the beginning of our marriage, it would have made more sense, right? Because of where he was within his own healing. And, I used to believe that I was a very strong woman in love with a deeply troubled man, right? A man who was struggling from major trauma as a child. And, now I have become aware that I was actually in an abusive relationship. Most women who are in abusive relationships just think that their man is, going through something, that they are working through something. And so we allow ourselves to continue to be, have the experience of being mentally, emotionally, and or physically abused.
But not
But
even knowing that that's what's really happening, because we
exactly,
think
yeah.
it's like, oh, it's they're going through something, and we start to bargain with ourselves in some way.
Yes, and we stay for the love, right? We stay
Right.
for the love. We
The
stay for
healing.
the we stay for the healing. We stay for the potentiality. We stay for the
That's it.
possibility, you know, and we also stay because we can often feel and see and experience the aspects that are the truth of them, right?
Exactly.
On top of the trauma. So most women who are in abusive relationships will not be able, they don't identify with it. And that's why when people are like, well, you know, you were in an abusive relationship, why didn't you get out? And it's like, well, you don't realize it at the time, right? You think again that you're a very strong woman, right? In
Right.
love with a man who's working through his shit, working through his
Yes,
stuff,
that's
right?
right.
And we provide a lot of space and a lot of grace, you know, for
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
you know. But anyway, so it came as a surprise. Very much so for me. There was no build up, there was no warning, there was no nothing. But as I look back now, you know, one of his best friends committed suicide 3 months beforehand. One of my late husband was he was a vet. So he was an Air Force fighter pilot veteran. So we had a lot of veterans in our lives. So one of the veterans that was a good friend of ours also committed suicide. And my late husband was actually a minister. So he actually had facilitated a young kid who was 20, how old? I think he was 26. So he had facilitated his memorial after this young kid had committed suicide. So there was a lot of suicide within our field, about 3 months. So all of these things happened pretty much, I think it was in 3 weeks of each other. And then 2.5 months later, he actually committed suicide. So that was definitely a very powerful experience, that our lives change in a moment.
Completely.
And that our lives have always and will always change in a moment, right? Yeah. The shift happens in the moment. We don't necessarily know that the shift is coming, or we think it might be coming, but the shift happens in a moment, because the only time that really exists is now. Right? We think about the past now, we think about the future now, but the only thing that really exists is now. So that was a really powerful experience of my whole world changed the moment that the detective told me that he had committed suicide.
So that's how you found out? A detective came to the house or called you?
No. He had been, so he had left the day before, and he had left to go help some of our friends with an old cabin that they have up here in the mountains. And I was engaged with work. And when I finished work, I tried to get in contact with him and couldn't get hold of him. So I finally went to our friend's house and said, hey, you know, when did Jason leave? And they said, he never came. He never arrived. He sent an email saying he couldn't make it today. So he had left the house telling me that he was going to our friends, and he never did. And so that's when I knew something was wrong. I called the police. They pinged his phone. I was out looking for him, and I had an idea of where he would be. And I was out looking for him all night. And what transpired was I had the exact location, and I had searched the whole area apart from this tiny little area, and that's where he was. You know, so the detectives reckon that he was out by himself for about 18 to 24 hours before he actually hung himself, because he hung himself via a tree in the woods.
And so a place that you two had been before together?
Yes, it was actually right by what we would call Sunset Rock. And so Sunset Rock was a place we would often go, and we had a 360 view of the Rocky Mountains and the flatlands, and you know, it was somewhere where we would go often. So yeah, so we had search and rescue out, and you know, stuff like that. So it was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon the next day that the detective came, and he said, we should go back to your house. And I was like, no, we shouldn't. You can tell me here.
Wow.
I had no desire for that to be
Yeah.
told at my house,
And the
you know.
containment. Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that
Mm.
really deepened my journey into what our human experience is all about.
Ah.
And it helped to catalyze my desire to explore, right? My desire to adventure into the truth of who I am and what this world is,
Mm.
you know, at a far deeper level. It was, I made a very conscious choice that I would keep my heart open. And so this was really my first full on experience of allowing myself to feel completely and fully that which I was experiencing.
Mm.
And for the first 2 months, it felt like my chest was being crushed, right? Because I mean, I love that man with everything that I had, right? And I was absolutely and utterly besotted by him, you know. And I mean, any grief is intense,
Yeah.
right?
But then you have the other layer of feeling like, I don't know, did you feel betrayed or?
No, I didn't actually. I had no anger towards him. I
Okay.
had no, which is really interesting. I just had love. Like I
Mm.
felt this, you know, I remember thinking, I wish I could have been there with you. If that was your
Wow,
choice,
sweetie.
right? Like if that's really what you needed,
Oh.
right? Like you were done, and I get it. You had had one fucking hell of a childhood, right? And
Mm.
your family are your family. And you know, and the amount of pain. And if you were really done, you know, I wish I could have been there with you. I wish
Wow.
that I could have just been present and loved you through it, because I've loved you through everything,
Mm.
you know. And I remember we had a cremation for him, and I held the ceremony. My father was like, no widow holds the ceremony. I was like, well, I'm not normal.
That's
Okay.
right.
All right. I'm not normal, you know. And I remember, so his Air Force buddies brought out his body, and I led the ceremony, and then they lifted his body into the cremation, you know, machine. And I was the one who pressed the button. And what I said is like, I've loved you and carried you this far. I will carry you and love you all the way till the end, right? All the way to when your body is ash,
Mm.
right? And that all existence, physical form existence of you no longer is,
Mm.
right? And yeah, so I mean, I had this most powerful and very consuming love for this man.
I can
And
feel it.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so my choice was to keep my heart open. That was the only thing, right? I was like, I'm going to keep my heart open. And I had this little saying, which is one step, one breath,
Mm.
right? One step, one breath, you know,
Yeah.
and to allow myself to be immersed in the reclamation of power,
Mhm.
right? And the reclamation of power at that time required me. It did, because my constructs had to come up, right? I had to, my emotional, mental constructs, my judgments, my expectations, right? The life that I thought was going to be manifested into form, I had to allow the space for it to dissolve back into formlessness, because it no longer was present. It no longer existed in the way
Yeah.
that it once did, or the potentiality of it,
Right.
right, was dissolving back into formlessness, which meant that a part of my identity, the way that I had conceived myself and perceived myself and my world, was also going through the transmutation
Mhm.
of from form back into formlessness. And because of the emotional attachments that I held at the time, there was immense pain
Oh,
that
I
came
would
with that.
imagine. Yeah.
And so for me to allow the transmutation, right, which is natural and normal and it just is in our human experience to occur, I needed to allow myself to feel.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is one of the hardest things to do, is turning towards. And I mean, it's easy to say, oh, you just turn towards. I mean, it just happened to me the other day where like this pattern of anxiety came up and I didn't want anything to do with it. But I knew, just sit with it. There's nothing more to do.
Yes.
And so somehow you had a frame in you where you could see that, not just the turning towards, but also you could see what was deconstructing. Like you could see the storylines of all the attachments of what your life was going to be like and what you two were going to do together. And you watched yourself unravel those.
Yes. Yeah. So there is often the experience of when we cross the threshold from phase 2 to phase 3 of our awakening, is that we go through a beautiful unraveling. Right. And I say beautiful because it really is. I mean, as much as it was intensely painful, it was the most loving expression. It was the most loving gift that I could give myself. I could give Jason, I could give those around me, was to keep myself present, right, with me and what was emerging and what was manifesting and what was needing to go back into formlessness, right? And so it was the most loving thing that I could say yes to.
Say
Right?
a little bit more of why. Go ahead.
No, go.
Well, I just love your languaging. It was the most loving thing.
Mm-hmm.
How was it the most loving thing to you and Jason and everyone around you to turn towards it that directly?
Because I was choosing love.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I was not choosing fear. I was not saying, I want this to go away. I don't want to feel this. I want this to change. I want this to be different. I want that, right? I wasn't in a place of fear. And the reason why, in some ways, this was the gift, right, is because my whole world had just fallen apart and there was nothing I was afraid of. Like my worst nightmare. Now, again, please, this is not required. This was just my journey, right? This was the manifestation for me to support me in my own awakening, but it is not required. I say this when it comes to relationships or like wealth. I remember getting down to $73 in my bank account and not knowing where money was coming from, if money was coming. And that was my experience of feeling the most abundant I'd ever felt in my life, feeling the most wealth. I wasn't stressed, I wasn't concerned. And that's when something shifted for me. And the reason I say that is it's not required. I chose to be a Scorpio during this lifetime. All right. So I chose to experience immense intensity.
Yes.
Right.
And death.
And yes, death, transformation, and what death and transformation simply is that which is formless coming into form, and that which is form going back into formlessness. So now I know that I never lost Jason, right? He was and is just a manifest aspect of consciousness, which I am. And even though I don't have him in form anymore, I will always have that representation, that expression of consciousness within me and also outside of me in all different ways. Right. Yeah. So I never lost him. I just don't have the form anymore.
And how did you reconcile your emotional body, your like not having the physical contact and all of the intricacies that brings in relationships?
Yeah. So I engaged with many things. I engaged with what is the you utilizing your words, the power reclamation process that I go through, and I also teach other women to journey to live into, right? So really what that meant was reclaiming my power from the thought constructs and
Yes.
the emotional constructs that were part of my identity, part of my perception, part of my narrative and stories. Right? And so there was a lot of that. I spent time, I gave myself time to feel. And the beautiful thing about this is what I think a lot of people don't realize is that everything holds the essence of the power that we are, meaning quantum energy, universe, God, formless awareness, consciousness, whatever you want to call it, right? Everything, behind everything is that, right?
Yes.
Because that is what manifests it all. And so these feelings that we hold, the reason why I call them love gifts is I'm like, when you actually allow yourself to receive it, yeah, what is held within it is your power. The power that you have given up to these narratives, to these mental concepts and constructs, to these emotional patterns. Yeah, because we are not our emotions. We experience our emotions, but we are not emotionality. Right? We are the being that is experiencing that which is manifesting as emotionality. Right? That is the truth. It's like it is the observer that is observing that which is to be observed and experienced.
Right. And this
Right?
is where your 4 phases feel so important, because what everything you just said, depending on where someone is orienting from, could sound like gibberish, could sound
Right.
total resonance, could
Oh yeah.
sound, it could sound bypassing, to some. And so that's what I think is so profound around, this way that you're framing. There's these different phases from which we view reality, and which one are we plugged into at any point. So I feel like the story you just shared would have been very common and natural for you to go into collapsing into victimization and be caught in that for a very long time, like decades of just not just the grief, but the story of how you've lost everything and you can't go on. And that happens and it's natural.
Yes.
And yet that's part of phase 1. So maybe this would be a time for you to kind of segue.
Yeah, and to be completely transparent, of course, is there were definitely times during
Yeah.
my grieving phase where I was like, I'm fucking done.
Yeah.
Peace out. This is whoo, okay. And that was just my concept of my capability. Right? That was the concept
Yes.
of what I was capable of holding and experiencing and transmuting. And it allowed the doubts, the self-doubt, the self-worth, the self-value, the capability to arise. And as that arose, I then I call it coming home, right? Power reclamation is coming
It
home
is.
to ourselves, right? It is like, oh, I have placed my power outside of me and also in my mind and in these narratives and in these stories and in these concepts of self and identity, right? And then I get to I call it quanta. So quanta is quantum energetics, it's quantum power, it's consciousness. I call it allowing quanta to come back home. And that's going from form to formlessness, because a thought is a form. An emotion is a form. It's an intangible form. We think of form as something physical that we can touch. But a thought form and an emotional form is also a form. And they also get to dissolve and be transmuted back into formlessness from which they were born.
Yeah.
Right?
And
So,
would you say the same about emotions then?
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah. So
yes,
those
very
just,
much.
and it's what we attach to it. It's whatever kind of history and conditioning and trauma that gets associated and wired together that makes our experience so unique to each of us and how we move through it.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. So
And
continue.
And it would have been easy for me, of course, to go into the phase one. So phase one isn't really a phase
Yeah, right.
as such. I mean, it's oftentimes our starting out point, right? It is the victim, it's victim consciousness. It is life happens to me. I have very little agency. It doesn't really matter what I decide. My environment, my upbringing, my circumstances dictate what is possible for me. And it's all, I mean, this is where coincidence lives. This is where fate lives. This is where, just that, I just deal with what happens, right? Without any real involvement, without any agency, without any form of sovereignty, without any power, right? This is what victimization is. And excuse me. And that's where, that's what is born as we are young, right? Because when we are young, we have very little agency, we have very little decision-making power. We have these godlike figures, right? Our parents or adults or our siblings that have so much say in our worlds.
Yes.
And we are sponges up until the age of 7, the age of reason, where our frontal cortex comes online.
Right.
But prior to that, we're just sponges, and everything is real and true, right? Everything is real and true. And so we just absorb it. And that is what makes up our narratives, our thought constructs, our emotional constructs, because when we're kids, we don't really understand separation, right? Yeah. So everything is about us. Yeah, everything is because of us. And there is no separation between us and our mom and or our dad or our whoever brought us up, or our siblings. It's like all of it is occurring, within our own identity, within our own concept of self. And we don't really have a concept of self.
Well, I think that's why children who are abused often think that there's something wrong with them and that they're broken, and they live their whole life blaming themselves for everything that happens, because the abuser is who they are. Like there's no separation.
Yes.
So continue, please.
So this is phase one, and a lot of people still exist into their adult years and for the rest of their lives in phase one. And then they might get glimpses of phase two, but that's oftentimes where a lot of people exist. And as the evolution of humanity, a lot of people now are in phase two. So this is the I'm going to use the word manifested by me, right? By my actions, by my mind. So this is what I call the badass. Right? This is
I can make shit happen.
Yes, this is the stage of empowerment. We start to discover and become aware of our personal power. We start to realize that, oh no, I can affect change within me and in my world. My decisions do have an effect. Right? My mindset does have an effect. How I view myself, how I view other has an effect. Yeah. So this is by me. I can make shit happen. This is the place of hustle, right? This is the place of willpower. This is the place of personal power. It is the phase of empowerment. And it's a beautiful phase. And this is where most self-development, a lot of spiritual practices, a lot of metaphysics, right, still exists. It exists within phase two, which is the empowerment phase. And it's special. And I want you to know, you and whoever else is listening, that not one phase is better than the other.
Right.
They're just different.
Absolutely.
That's all. Right. So the empowerment phase is beautiful. Right? That's why I call it the badass. You feel powerful. You're like, I do have agency. I have sovereignty. We start to become aware of the power that we are. Right? But it is the power of the mind, decision, mindset, right? Conceptions, constructs. So what often happens is we take one limited construct, which is the victim, like anything that was born out of our victim phase, and we change it, right? And we change it to another limited construct. Now, a more elevated, a more powerful, right? But still a limited construct.
Yeah. Can you give an example of what that might look like in phase two?
Yeah. So, okay. So mindset's a great example.
Mm-hmm.
We often spend a lot of our time overcompensating for the negative constructs and emotions that we feel by
Yes.
working on our mindset, right? So this is the positive spin, right? This is about, so phase two is achievement, right? It's the paradigm of achieving. So the paradigm of achieving means that there is success and there is failure. There is reward and there is consequence. There is reward and punishment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so we start working on our mindset, which is beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And our mind can only perceive what already exists in our outside world. Okay. So we shift our mind, and that takes time and that takes effort because we're working with matter, changing matter. Right now I go into the quantum.
Yeah,
But
maybe actually just for foundation, do you think that would be helpful for listeners for you to just share a little bit about the quantum
sure.
in this phase, or do you think we should finish this and then maybe come back to that?
No, I know. I mean, it's always relevant.
It's all woven. But
right. So
yeah.
whatever label you want to put on it, right? I don't care what it is. I don't care whether you relate to what it is I'm going to share with you as God, universe, angels, guides, higher self, consciousness. Okay. For me, it is the quantum field. So the quantum field is the infiniteness of creation.
Mm-hmm.
It is the formlessness, right, where everything exists and nothing exists. So in quantum physics, they call it the 0 point. The 0 point is where everything is born, right? Everything of form is born from. But when we are in formlessness, right, when we are not existing in this or experiencing this human self, we are just formlessness, and we just are. Mm-hmm. Right. So this is the unity of the masculine and the feminine. The masculine is the nothingness of creation, of everythingness, and then the feminine is everythingness, right, of the nothingness. Mm-hmm. So formlessness just is. And when we're in formlessness, we just are. There is no beginning, there is no ending. There just is.
Yeah.
And then we give ourselves this gift of the human experience. Mm-hmm. And this human experience is to experience formless, that which is formless in form. Because when we are just formlessness, we're not experiencing it. We just are it. Mm-hmm. And this is the adventure of our human life, is to experience creation in form, in its infinite potentiality. Right? And to take this adventure of a lifetime into not just what is possible, because that's what the mind perceives is what is possible, but the potential of infiniteness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Thanks for bringing the frame in.
You're welcome, if that is helpful. Because
I think so, because we're talking about phases, but just to like tie it, we're talking about like coming from this formlessness, this fullness of being, this emptiness of being into a phase of separation, victimization. Yes. And then we're talking about, you're going to go back into like phase two. And, you know, we were talking about an example, we could come back to that, but just what happens as we start to gather more of these, remember and call back more of these parts and play in the form and formlessness.
Yeah, and you bring up a wonderful, wonderful point, which is it's the separation. So phase one and phase two is the illusion of separation. Mm-hmm. There's this beautiful Sufi saying, which is there are 7 filters between me and God, but no filters between God and me. Mm-hmm. So it is the illusion that we are separate. Mm-hmm. And we engage with this, we live into this illusion of separation in so many different ways. Mm-hmm. We believe that there is an out there, right? That other people have agency in our lives, right? That things happen outside of us without our control, without our say-so, without our power. We live into separation through the separation of self with other. We live into the separation of between the masculine and the feminine, right? We live into separation even within us, higher self, God, something that is separate from us. We live into the separation through things like law of attraction. There's something to attract. There is something that exists outside of us that we need to vibrate at a specific frequency for us then to be good enough. Essentially, that's the underlying message, not that everybody realizes it, but for us to be good enough to therefore attract in from somewhere else, somewhere that is separate from us, the desires that we hold. And it has to be that way when we are living into the paradigm of achievement. Right? Because the paradigm of achievement is the paradigm of duality, and duality means separateness.
Exactly. Right? So if someone were listening to what you just said, we often
didn't think
don't
I was
have
batshit crazy.
Yes. No, you are. I love where you're coming from. But in this whole notion of we don't have any control to what happens to us, someone might say, well, you didn't have any control that your husband left. And so how does that fit into all of this?
Yeah. So there are, it's a very good question and something I pondered for a while, right? So I can actually trace back that's the beautiful thing about hindsight, right? Is I can actually trace back when that specific manifestation started. And it was before I was married. So I used to have these, and this was my biggest fear, right? This was something that I unconsciously poured so much power into, right?
So you're
Because I
touching
wasn't.
your throat, like.
Yeah, so I would have, it was a very interesting thing. Is as soon as I got married to Jason, I would start to have these irrational fears of being choked, not being able to breathe. We spent so much time out in the backcountry and I wouldn't eat nuts, even though I'm not allergic to nuts in any way. I would eat nuts in the front country, but in the back country, because I was like, well, maybe I have anaphylactic shock. Like I had this immense fear of being choked, and it also, death manifested in my journey with my late husband in the form of like one of my close friends. Her husband, called Jason, got hit by a truck and died unexpectedly. There was a house that we were going to buy, and it came available because a young man called Jason had passed away from a heart attack at a young age. I had this immense fear that one day Jason was going to go out into the backcountry and never come back, right? And I would have dreams about this and nightmares and stuff like that. It was this constant underlying thing.
And so do you feel like that was sort of foresight into the field of the future, or how do you make that out? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So what it is that we experience outside of us is the reflection of what it is that we have awakened to and are aware of within us. Yeah. So I've had, apart from my father, I've had most of my major male figures in my life die young. So my twin, number one, I was a twin who was male, died before I was born, right in the womb. And then I had my uncle, and then I had two of my closest guy friends. And then I was part of a crazy adrenaline seeking group, which I was the only woman. And there was 22 of us, and there's 4 of us left, right? Because they've all died doing something crazy that they loved. So this is the accumulation of a full journey, right, into my own young conditioned mental constructs and emotional constructs. Now I know that might be hard for some people to wrap their minds around or believe, right? However, it was the outpicturing of something that had been building and manifesting
Mm-hmm.
in so many different ways since I was young.
And that what had been manifesting was early deaths? Like what
Yeah,
exactly?
of men who
Yeah,
were,
of
I
men.
loved and were important
Mm-hmm.
to me. So
Mm-hmm.
that was like, we hold these core negative, these core fears,
Mm-hmm.
and they're different for each one of us,
Mm-hmm.
right? And as long as we hold them, yeah, they will manifest in some shape or form. Now, that's not something to be afraid of. I don't want you to compound the fear. What is important is the holding. We're attached to it. And so as long as we are attached to it, we hold it in, we hold it with our power in our reality. And our reality is made up of the intangible and the tangible.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
Well, I'm just curious, do you think had you not been holding on to it, if something had sort of that energy had been released and it had been released however it's living in Jason, do you think there would have been a different outcome?
Oh yeah, for sure. Oh yeah, with that.
That's the direct link. That's how directly you feel the link is to these mindsets, beliefs, and the actual manifestation of them and the
Yeah.
repetition of these cycles.
Yes,
Please.
exactly. So, I mean, it was manifesting in my world over and over and over again, you know, just in different ways and in different forms. It was my love gift to myself. Hey, this is present. This is ready to be dissolved from form back into formlessness. I just wasn't aware of what it was. I didn't have a framework. I hadn't received or become aware of the wisdom.
Yes.
Right? You know,
So,
and yeah.
no, I want you to finish what you were going to say.
Okay. And so, yes, but that is also not important, right? Because it is what it is. It was what it was. It was exactly perfect because every single moment, the beautiful thing about the mind is that we judge the perfection of every single moment because every single moment is perfection. It is an outpicturing. It is an outpicturing of consciousness itself, right? Because that is what manifests everything. That is what is behind everything. That is the essence of everything. And we judge the perfection of creation. Right? And that's what our mind does. You know, so would one outcome have been better than the other? I don't care, right? That's not the point. Could it have been different? Yes, of course. Everything is not solid, right? It is changeable in every single moment because our worlds are being manifested, created, right, in every single moment. So our whole world shifts in a moment. And yes, that could have shifted for me, right? If I had become aware on my journey sooner, earlier of the wisdom, you know, awakened to the power that I truly am, sure. But it was still perfectly designed by me, for me, through me, as me.
Not as a punishment of some kind.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah,
So
it wasn't a lesson to learn.
So we're going to get back to 3 and 4 because
Sure.
that you're already feels like
Yes.
you're touching on them. And I want people to really get a deep sense. But before we do you have those sensations anymore now that Jason has passed? Do you have that throat? Like, is that those fears are gone?
No, it was as soon as he died, gone. I've never had them ever since.
So just what's your summary of that?
It was the transmutation from form back into formlessness. So everything that was held within, right, that those constructs, those narratives, those stories, those emotional patterns dissolved in that moment.
In a way that they had not in all the previous years.
Yeah.
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 Thank you.
It just dissolved.
Yeah.
Right. And it dissolved effortlessly, actually, without me doing anything.
Right. So it wasn't even the journey, because there was a whole other journey of you turning towards all of the intensity and the grief and the all of that, that was a different kind of unfolding into the formlessness. But
Yeah.
this was like a particular piece of power that feels like you reclaimed
Yes.
by living the experience all the way through
Yes.
without, you know, I guess you're going to get to the level 4, but level 4 is more about like, there's no right or wrong. There's no perfect, everything is just as is. So from that space, his passing or him not passing, if you both had interrupted the energetics, not a big deal either way. Right.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I
Which
mean,
is so, go ahead.
who knows? Who knows how it would have, how it could have manifested differently, right? Whether we would stay together, whether we'd got divorced, whether there was no longer abuse in our relationship, whether, I mean, who knows? Who knows? You know, who knows? And that's the part of the mind that is limiting. We need to know. Right. So I always say journeying into phase 3 and phase 4 is journeying into the unknown, but the unknown of the mind, but the known of the soul. There is a big difference, right? We journey into the unknown of the mind because the mind has no concept, right, of really formlessness, right? Your mind does not need to comprehend, does not need to understand, but it can only perceive of what is and what has been.
Correct.
Right? What has already occurred. You know, but this is a coming home to the knowing of your soul, right? The knowing of your very essence, your very power, the infinite potentiality that you truly are. I like to call it quantum queen, right? You become queen of quantum. Right?
So this is coming into phase 3. So phase 1 is the victimization. That's when we feel very separate. Phase 2 is, I think you referred to it as the masculine energetic before. It's the achiever, it's the manifesting, it's the, you know,
the
making
doer.
things happen. Yeah. Right.
It's the
And there's
badass.
liberation because there's some agency that starts to occur there because you don't have agency in the victimization. And now tell us about the soul's journey into phase 3 and 4. Yeah.
So phase 3 is the feminine, right? And the feminine is the manifested through me. So this is the opening. This is the emergence. This is the receiving. This is why this is like the reclamation. As we reclaim, we open. As we reclaim, we awaken. As we reclaim, we expand. As we reclaim that which we truly are has a channel to be fully, to emerge and to be experienced. This is the leaning back. This is the realizing that there is no real cause and effect in our outside world. We start to dissolve or reclaim our power, utilizing your words, from the illusion of separateness, that we are not separate, right? That everything that is us and our worlds, our close proximity, our direct experience, right, and that which we see further afield, right, is all a manifestation or expression of us as consciousness in all of its varieties and all of its forms. And we start to awaken to not willpower or personal power. We start to awaken to quantum power, right, which is, there is no efforting, there is no struggle, there is no force. You're in phase 3, there is nothing for you to achieve. There is everything for you to awaken to. Right? There is nothing for you to do. There is everything for you to experience. So your doingness starts to transmute or transform into, rather than your source of your results or one of the sources of your results, right? It's like, I got to make it happen. I've got this, fucking nailing it. You know, I can make this happen. I can make this through my actions, decisions, my mind, right? Like that badass. Yeah, we start to relax. We start to open, and we start to realize that, or awaken to, that it is It is our internal world. We start to take our focus outside of us, looking for validation, right? Outside of us, looking for permission outside of us, asking our outside world for permission to have, to be, to experience.
We stopped doing that in phase 3.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we start to realize that our doingness, the only purpose of our doingness is to experience creation made form. That's it. It is for our joy. It is for our pleasure. And this is deeply feminine. It is for the love of it. It is for the love of experiencing that which was formless being brought and manifested into form. That's what our doingness is for. That is the purpose. It's not to get results. It's not to make money. It's not to make anything happen. It is so that we can experience that which is already manifested for the love. That's it. The feminine is all about love. It's all about experiencing, expressing, right? Love. And love is omnipresent.
Well, it's sort of how you showed up with Jason. You know, it's like, had he been there, you would have actually said, let me help you. How can I help you cross over? Yeah. That was this kind of love.
Yeah.
And yeah. And then what's phase 4?
So phase 4 is, so as we start to journey deeper into these phases, it becomes a little bit more challenging to conceptualize through words, because these realms or these phases, these paradigms go beyond the mind, right? So phase 1, phase 2 is limitation. Okay. And limitation is of mind. So this is when we're living into mind. This is when we're living into making things happen with mind, living in, and mind strategizes our doingness, right? And we strategize all these things. We plan, we want to know, right? We want to know the steps. One of the questions that I used to get asked, I don't get asked as often these days, but how? I want to know the how. I'm like, it's always the wrong question. It's never about how, it's never about what you do. It's always about what you are awakening to.
Yeah.
Right.
Beautiful.
So, and so it gets a little bit more challenging. However, phase 4 is manifested as me. So this is when we start to experience the infiniteness within the finite. And what I mean by that is the infinite, never-ending moreness of the truth of who we are, manifesting into form with no limitation, right? So we experience infinite within our finite lives, because this is a finite experience, right? There is a beginning and there is an ending, right? So we get to experience the infiniteness within the finite, the unity within the duality. And what I mean by that is we are still experiencing, right, some form of separation, yeah, meaning that my body, I pick up this mug, ooh, right, there is some experience, but we know, and at the same time experience the unity, that I am everything and everything is me. So this is manifested as me, right? Everything, we realize that there is no difference between our inner world and our outer world, that it is us, right? There is no difference between me and you. You are me, I am you, right? Just in different expressions, in different manifestations, in different forms.
Yeah.
And there is this experience of, I mean, phase 3, you have it as well, directed manifestation, right? So you have awakened to the power, and you have awakened to everything already exists. So if everything already exists, nothing needs to be made happen. Nothing needs to be created. Everything already exists, and you are everything.
Is there no will?
You are not separate.
Is there no will in this phase? Because I know in phase 2, part of that manifestation is all about having will and
willpower. Yeah. So it's more of a
like determinant of desire, which is the human realm. And
because then again it just becomes for the love of the adventure of experiencing. It's like, oh, I haven't experienced this yet. Oh yeah, I desire to. right? You know, and you know, the purpose of experiencing the wonder of creation in greater and grander ways, right? Just moreness, right? Just the moreness. And at the same time as we're experiencing the moreness, we're also experiencing the nothingness of peace. So there is freedom and peace, which is the masculine. And then there is love and moreness and richness and beauty, which is the feminine. And we experience all of these things, all of these expressions of ourselves at the same time.
In phase
So,
4.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so there is no, it's like we don't even relate to ourselves just as this body. Right? We don't limit ourselves. It's like, oh no, everything. And so the best way I can describe it is to give a little bit of a metaphor or imagery. Like you are there at the center and you are playing with these threads of creation, of manifestation that weave the continuous tapestry of the masterpiece that is the full and pure and true expression of everything that you are.
Gorgeous.
And you just play, right? And you weave.
So there's so much exquisiteness, like just, I mean, there's so much here, and I would love to go deeper, and I have 1,000 questions, and I just saw the time and I was like, no, but here's what I want to ask you. I would love to have you come back because I wanted to go through a couple other things that I find really profound about your work. But I wonder, just a couple of questions. So in those moments where life feels like it is happening to us, and there's a longing to have a different experience, what would you suggest for people?
Well, that longing is real and true, right? That is you calling to you. And it's not because you are judging, right? Even though that the mind will judge the experience. Like, I don't want to feel this. I don't want, get me out of here. This sucks. I want something different. But underlying that I want something different, it's a calling. You're calling to yourself that it is time for you to journey even deeper into the vastness of the power and love and wisdom and abundance that you are. So my recommendation is follow your inspiration, actually listen to it. Because you are constantly and always being guided. You are never lacking guidance, ever, ever, ever.
And in those moments where it feels like guidance is gone, because I know in phase 1, when I'm there, I can feel like forgotten by the divine. You know, there's just so much separation.
Yeah.
And so it's hard when the nervous system is so primed to, it's harder to hear these larger aspects of self. Anything you would suggest for people in that moment?
Yeah, reach out. I really would highly recommend reaching out, because what you are in is a spiral of fear.
Yes.
Right? You're in this spiral. And when we reach out and connect with, if we cannot connect with love within, right? Because there is no separation between within and without. But when we are struggling to connect with love within, right? Connect with love without.
Yeah.
Right? Connect with your bestie, connect with a book, listen to music, right? And I'm not talking about circumnavigating the feelings that you are having. Yeah, but there is your wisdom that comes through, or divine wisdom comes through all types of channels.
Yeah,
Right?
agreed.
From friends to a random stranger to books to a piece of music to, I mean, you know, seeing an animal in front of, I mean, whatever. So I would say reach out.
Yeah.
And in whatever ways that you feel you can.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's just a text message to your bestie, which is, I miss you, I love you, or can you give me a call, or you want to meet up for coffee, or, to disrupt the pattern, disrupt the
Exactly.
spiral.
And I think that's key, is being able to find people who won't go into judgment and just be able to meet you there. Because it's the isolation that feels, it just makes the separation even more. So you're right. I think imbuing it with love, whether that's a book or nature or a person, that seems so medicinal. But at the same time, what I hear you saying is this is not about bypassing going to the feelings as well. So it's like this dance between feeling.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's, these feelings that we have, these emotionality, and emotionality is not you, right? Our emotionality comes from the ways in which we, the thought constructs we hold, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's an ebb and flow,
Mm-hmm.
right? You can be in power and still feel the emotions of something else. Like, you are so capable of both.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So for me, I'll give you an example. So with Jace, when Jace died, I set certain things for myself. I was like, you will get up every single morning, you will brush your teeth, you will make your bed, you will get dressed, and you will eat one meal, because I couldn't taste anything. I didn't want to eat. That's my tendency. And I couldn't taste, I had no taste buds for a year and a half. Like, I couldn't taste food. And so you will eat one meal a day, and you will interact with society.
Hmm.
So I would walk from my house, right, to the coffee shop twice a day. I engaged with massage. I would have a massage twice a week because I missed touch. And I
Mm-hmm.
knew how important that was, right, for me to receive some form of love in that way.
Mm-hmm.
I would read books. I would watch movies. I would engage with life, right? Because no matter what phase you're in, engulf yourself with life. Be in life. Be in the experience. I would meet with my Akashic Records reader, who, that's not what she did for me. She did a lot of energy and spiritual work. I would go meet with my therapist,
Mm-hmm.
right? He was a hypnotherapist, and I would go on these wonderful hypnotherapeutic journeys,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so these were the decisions, right? Because we don't often go from phase 1 to phase 3. Okay.
Right.
So we normally go from phase 1 to phase 2. So I was making phase 2 decisions,
Mm-hmm.
right? Even while still, experiencing that intense grief and that immense feeling of separation.
Yeah.
Right. So I
Beautiful.
reached out.
Yeah.
I reached out.
Thank you for sharing that. It seems like there's something around every phase, like you said, it's not that we're trying to arrive at a certain place. It's just it emerges in the moment. And that there will be times where we might orient in phase 2 and 3 and be playing, but then there'll be times we'll be in phase 1. And I think what I really get from the whole system and this whole process of being human is that there's something around being able to grow capacity to be with all of it at once. Like, oh, I'm feeling victimized right now. And I also know somewhere in me, I know the fullness of who I am. And right now I can't access it. And there's something about the dropping of trying to fix or being wrong that I think can just pop me to a different phase. So it's a dance, but it is a dance of building the complexity of just being able to notice everything is there if we're able to
Yeah.
track it. So,
Yeah. There's a reason why spiritual gurus talk about, it's all about awareness.
yeah,
Right.
exactly.
We
Yeah.
can only shift, right? Change the transmute from formless to form and form back into formlessness as we are aware.
Yeah.
Right.
Beautiful.
And so, and yeah, you brought up something beautiful, which is there is nothing wrong with you. You are not fucked up. You do not need to be fixed. You are not broken. You are experiencing many different aspects, expressions of the infinite. And that is all it is. It doesn't mean anything about you. It doesn't mean anything about what you're capable of, what you're not capable of, whether you're worthy, whether you are deserving. Those questions do not exist in the truth of who you are. Right? So,
Yeah.
yes,
Thank
there
you
is
for
nothing. There is nothing to fix. There is just other things to awaken to.
Well, that's just it. As we wrap up here, I love this as like an ending note is there's nothing wrong with us. We're human. And we're human beings means we're in a finite form, experiencing all sorts of different things that are going to create contraction. And when we can expand our view of the different phases and have some conscious play of like, do I want to stay in this place of victimization? That's where I am right now. Is there another choice, something else I want? Or not, in phase 3, there isn't even the thinking, it just happens. So I think I just appreciate you bringing all the richness of these flavors here today. And I wonder if you have any parting thoughts for the listeners that you'd want to impart around the journey.
So I've dug around the journey.
Yeah, just the journey of being human.
Dive more and more into your work. Your work is exquisite. I've looked into it. I've read a lot about the things that you put out there and the service that you provide and the gift and the wisdom is perfect, especially for people who are moving from phase 1 to phase 2 or are moving deeper into their own phase 2 journey of empowerment. And I would say connect with you. Your work is stunning. It's absolutely stunning.
Thank you.
And
Well,
then
go ahead.
I was going to say, and then the other closing thought is every single moment is perfect, no matter how you judge it. It is perfect. And we are meant to go through this beautiful and adventurous exploration of awakening. And it's a journey. And even at times you might think that you would like to miss a part of it. I can tell you that you don't want to miss a single moment of it.
Beautiful. So, how can people find you to do if they want to explore the work you're doing in the world?
Well, normal places, Facebook,
Yes.
Insta.
Okay.
So,
You'll have to give me, I'll put them in the show notes.
yeah, so Facebook is at Sister Mind Society.
Sister Mind Society.
And then Insta is just at Sister Mind.
Okay.
If you ever want to see what programs are available at any given time, you just need to go to, anybody just needs to go to sistermindcircle.com.
Perfect.
And that is a simple page. I don't do anything complicated in any way. There is not a huge website that you get drop down menus and you have to go through the things and anything along those lines. Literally, you go to sistermindcircle.com and what pops up is the programs that are currently available and running. And that's it.
Fantastic. And it's primarily for women working with these phases and kind of the whole journey around wealth.
Yes. So it doesn't matter the gateways that you choose into your own awakening. It doesn't matter whether it's health, relationships, wealth, business, anything else. It doesn't matter, right? They all lead you into your own awakening. So the gateways that I choose are women and wealth and feminine power.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the gateways, wealth and feminine power, but it's always centered around awakening.
Yeah.
You know, like right now I'm running it's called Revelation, and it is manifest as you listen. And it is a direct and living experience of the art of manifestation. And I'll give you a little hint. Manifestation is not complicated. It is not difficult. It is natural to each one of us. The art of manifestation is all about resolving the inner gap between your formlessness, your power, and that which you desire. That's it.
Just closing the gap between the two.
Yep.
And you guide people through the process of discovering that inside of themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of it is around awakening and manifestation through the gateways of feminine power, because it's so beautiful. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
I want to experience, I desire to experience more feminine power just oozing and flowing out into this world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because when women are in their power, what they manifest more of is love, all different forms and expressions of love. And Steve Jobs once said, I want to put a dent in the universe. And I'm like, fuck that. I want to reweave it into an expression of unity and love, because why not?
Why not? Oh, thank you so much for being here today. It's been such a pleasure to be with you.
It's a pleasure to be with you, and great. I loved your questions, and thank you for holding this space and providing this channel and just including me. It's such an honor.
Oh, thank you, sweetie. To be continued, I hope.
Okay. Yes, that would be great.
Good. All right. I'll be in touch.
Okay. All right.
I hope you enjoyed the show today. If you want more, you can subscribe to this channel. This will automatically queue up the next episode for your listening. If you have a burning question or topic you want to learn more about, please send an email to Ask Anne Marie. The direct link is located in the show notes. And please leave a review. This keeps me inspired and focused to bring you more. If you want to learn more about my work as a power reclamation guide, leadership coach, and organizational culture consultant, you can visit my websites in the notes. Thank you again for joining today.